Captain Ryland had walked many worlds before, but never one as strange as this. The jungle around him was alive with sounds he did not know. Every step he took made the ground tremble with hidden life. Shadows moved between twisted trees, and the air smelled heavy, as if the forest itself was watching him. He held his rifle close, scanning the tall vines and the glowing plants. He was alone. His ship had landed miles away, and his mission was simple: map the area and find out if the planet had resources worth keeping. But nothing about this place felt simple anymore. A sudden roar shook the air. It was deep, primal, and so powerful that Ryland felt in his chest. Birds with wings like blades flew from the trees, screaming as they disappeared into the dark sky. Ryland froze. That sound was no storm. That was a predator. He slowly moved forward, every muscle tight, ready to fight or run. Then, through the thick fog, he saw it. The alien beast was massive, larger than any animal Ryland had ever seen. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered like metal, and its head carried long horns that glowed faintly blue. Its eyes were sharp, burning like molten fire, and locked onto him the moment he stepped into the clearing. Ryland stopped breathing. One wrong move, and this thing could kill him in seconds. His rifle felt small, almost useless, in his hands. The beast stood tall, muscles shifting under its armored skin, its tail cutting the air like a whip. For a long moment, nothing happened. The forest was silent, as if it too was waiting to see what choice the beast would make. Then something unexpected happened. The beast lowered its head. It did not attack. It did not roar again. It simply watched him. Its chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, and then slowly it moved to the side. Behind it, hidden in the shadows, two smaller shapes appeared. Ryland's eyes widened. They were cubs, small, fragile versions of the giant beast, with soft scales and round, glowing eyes. They pressed against their mother's leg, shivering in fear. Ryland felt his stomach twist. He had read reports about predators on alien worlds, but nothing had prepared him for this. These cubs should have stayed far from him, yet the mother was showing them to him. It was almost as if she wanted him to see. The beast lowered itself to the ground with a heavy thud. A low growl escaped its throat, but not in anger. The sound was weak, strained, almost pained. That was when Ryland noticed the dark liquid dripping from its side. Blood. The creature was wounded, and badly. He stepped closer without thinking, his instincts battling his fear. The wound was deep, burned as if struck by energy weapons. Someone or something had hunted this beast. The mother looked at him again, her fiery eyes softer now. She nudged her cubs forward with her massive head. The little ones stumbled closer to Ryland, their eyes wide, their tiny claws clicking against the stone. Ryland could hardly believe it. This was a predator feared across the stars, a creature spoken of in hushed voices by traders and mercenaries. Yet here it was, offering him its young. His mind raced. Why him? Why a human? The galaxy was full of stronger, faster, deadlier species. But in this moment, this dying beast had chosen him. The cubs reached his boots and looked up at him with innocent eyes. One of them made a soft sound, almost like a cry. Ryland's heart pounded harder than it ever had in battle. He had faced pirates, soldiers, and monsters of war, but nothing compared to the single choice: take them or walk away. The beast let out another sound, weaker than before. Her great body shook, and her eyes began to close. She was slipping away. With the last of her strength, she pushed the cubs closer to him and lowered her head until it almost touched the ground. Ryland knew. She was not asking. She was trusting a human with what was most precious to her. His hands trembled as he reached down and lifted the first cub. Its scales were warm, its tiny body shaking with fear, but it did not resist. The second one pressed against his leg. Waiting, Ryland gathered them both in his arms. The mother beast watched him, her eyes dimming but still focused on him. For a brief moment, there was a silent understanding between them, an unspoken bond. She gave a final, slow breath, and then her body fell still. The jungle grew quiet again. The only sound left was the soft whimper of the cubs in his arms. Ryland stood there, stunned, a human explorer, holding the children of one of the deadliest species in the galaxy. He looked down at the cubs, then at the fallen beast. And in that moment, he realized something that sent a chill down his spine. Whatever hunted this creature would come for its cubs next. And now, he was the only one standing in their way. The story of one man and two alien cubs had just begun. And somewhere in the darkness, the hunters were already moving. Ryland stood frozen, his arms heavy with the weight of the cubs. The jungle around him was thick with silence. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of danger. He could feel it pressing against his skin, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. The great beast lay still on the ground, her chest rising only faintly. Her life was fading, yet her eyes remained on him. They were no longer the eyes of a predator. They were the eyes of a mother. Ryland knelt beside her. He had no words, only the instinct to reach out. His gloved hand touched the cool, rough scales of her neck. Her body shuddered, but she did not move away. Instead, she lowered her head until her horns scraped the soil. The cubs whimpered, their small bodies pressing against his chest. They could feel their mother's weakness. Their wide eyes looked at him now, as if searching for something, comfort, safety, or perhaps hope. Ryland's throat tightened. He had been a soldier before he was an explorer. He knew the language of sacrifice. He had seen comrades give their lives so others could live. And now, on a world far from home, an alien beast was making the same request. The wound across her side was ugly, burned black at the edges. No blade had done this. No natural claw. This was a weapon's mark, advanced, deadly, and precise. Whoever had struck her had done so with intent. Hunters. The thought came to him like a blade to the spine. He had heard rumors of such things. Bands of killers who track rare alien species for trophies, meat, or worse. If they had wounded her, then they would still be near. And if they found him with her cubs, he dared not finish the thought. The beast lifted her head one final time. She looked at him with a fierce, glowing stare. Not wild, not afraid, commanding. She gave a deep rumble that shook the ground, though her strength was nearly gone. Ryland understood. She was not just asking him. She was ordering him. Take them. Protect them. Carry them away. His heart pounded. This was not his fight. He was a lone human on a mapping mission, a man with no backup, no allies, and no chance against whoever had done this. Yet, as he looked at the cubs trembling in his arms, something inside him hardened. Humans had a long history of stepping into fights they did not choose. They had fought for survival, for family, and for freedom. And sometimes they had fought for strangers. That was what set them apart in the galaxy. This strange, stubborn loyalty that made no sense but changed everything. The mother's eyes began to dim. She let out a low, final growl, a sound that was not a warning but a farewell. Then, with one last breath, her body went still. The cubs cried out in high-pitched whimpers, burying their heads against Ryland's chest. He held them close, his jaw tight. For a long moment, he simply stood there, listening to the jungle around him. And then he heard it. Footsteps, soft at first, then heavier, breaking branches and crunching leaves. Voices followed, harsh, guttural words in a language he did not recognize. But the tone was clear. They were hunting. Ryland's stomach twisted. The hunters were close, maybe only a few hundred meters away. They had likely heard the beast's death cry. And now, they were coming to finish the job. He looked at the lifeless body of the mother one last time. "I'll take care of them," he whispered, though he knew she could no longer hear. "I promise." The promise burned inside him like fire. He adjusted his grip on the cubs, tucking them against his chest so they would not fall. Their small claws gripped his jacket, and their glowing eyes blinked up at him with fragile trust. The hunters' voices grew louder. He could see shapes moving between the trees now. Tall, armored figures with weapons that glowed in the dim light. Ryland knew he had seconds to decide. Fight here, over her body, and surely die. Or run into the unknown, carrying the last hope of a species that was not his own. He took a deep breath. His soldier's mind screamed at him to retreat, to find cover, to think fast. His human heart whispered something else, moved forward. Without another word, Ryland turned and slipped into the thick jungle, every step quick and silent. The cubs clung to him, their tiny bodies warm against his chest. Behind him, the hunters reached the clearing. He heard them stop, heard their cruel laughter as they found the mother's body. One of them shouted, and then there was silence. Ryland did not look back. His legs carried him deeper into forest, vines tearing at his clothes, branches cutting his skin. The cubs whimpered, but he held them tight, whispering quiet words to calm them. The weight of his promise pressed on him heavier than his rifle ever had. He was now protector, guardian, and shield. And somewhere in the shadows, unseen and merciless, the hunters were already following his trail. The dangerous request had been made, and Ryland had accepted it. But he did not yet understand how far that choice would reach, or how deeply it would shake the galaxy itself. The jungle was alive with noise, but to Ryland it sounded like the pounding of war drums. Every crack of a branch, every whisper of leaves, every faint growl from unseen creatures, all pressed against his nerves. The cubs clung to him tightly, their small claws digging into his jacket, their breaths fast and uneven. He moved quickly, keeping low, weaving between thick roots and towering trees. His soldier's instincts screamed at him, "Do not walk in a straight line. Do not leave a clear trail. Never let your enemy see where you're going." But the forest was treacherous, and every path looked the same. Behind him came the hunters. He could hear them now. Heavy boots crushing undergrowth, guttural voices barking orders in their strange language. Sometimes they laughed, a cruel, sharp sound that carried far through the dark. They were not worried about stealth. They were confident, like predators chasing prey that had no hope of escape. Ryland adjusted his grip on the cubs. They were light, but carrying them slowed him down. He had weapons, yes, but not enough ammunition to face an entire hunting party. His mind raced for options. He could hide. He could fight. But with the cubs in his arms, both choices seemed like suicide. The forest shifted around him, and the air grew thicker. Strange glowing insects hovered like lanterns above the ferns, casting pale light across the path. The cubs whimpered softly, and Ryland whispered to them, "Quiet now, quiet." A sound tore through the silence. It was not the hunters this time. It was something else. A howl, long and broken, echoing through the trees. It sent shivers down his spine. The cubs pressed their faces against his chest, trembling. Ryland realized with unease that this forest was not only dangerous because of the hunters. It was home to other predators too, predators that might not care who or what they killed. He crouched behind a thick trunk and listened. The hunters had stopped. He could hear them speaking to each other, confused by the howl. For a moment, there was silence, as if even they were unsure whether to continue. Then came a voice, deeper and crueler than the others. It barked a single command, sharp and final. The group moved again, louder than before. Ryland cursed under his breath. Whoever was leading them was not afraid of this forest. That made him worse than a predator. That made him determined. He needed cover. He needed somewhere the hunters could not see him, at least for a little while. Ahead, through thick vines, he spotted what looked like stone. Not natural rock, but something shaped. His pulse quickened. He forced his way through the vines, careful not to trip, and found himself standing at the mouth of a ruin. It was old, so old that time itself seemed to weigh on it. Broken walls leaned against giant trees, half buried in roots. Strange carvings glowed faintly along the surface, symbols in a language he could not understand. The cubs stirred, their tiny claws twitching as if they recognized it. One of them made a soft sound, like a chirp, and reached toward the glowing carvings. Ryland hesitated. He knew the danger of walking into unknown structures. Traps, collapses, even energy fields had lie within. But the voices of the hunters were closing in, their footsteps echoing through the jungle. He had no choice. He stepped inside. The air was cooler within the ruins. Dust hung in the beams of dim light that broke through cracks in the ceiling. Strange markings covered the walls, glowing brighter now that the cubs were near. It was as if the place itself recognized them. Ryland pressed himself against the wall, holding his breath. The hunters were close. He could hear them entering the clearing outside. One of them snarled, and he knew they had found the mother's trail. Another shouted, pointing toward the vines. They were coming. The cubs squirmed in his arms, frightened by the voices. Ryland tightened his grip, whispering again, "Quiet, please." But the younger of the two let out a small cry, high-pitched and sharp. The voices outside stopped. A growl followed. Boots pounded against the ground. They had heard. Ryland's heart raced. He scanned the ruin for any exit, any shadowed passage that might take him deeper inside. His eyes caught on a narrow hallway, half-collapsed but still open. Without thinking, he darted into it just as the hunters crashed through the vines behind him. The cubs whimpered, and Ryland pressed him close, moving faster, deeper, through twisting halls. The carvings lit his path with eerie blue light, guiding him forward. Behind him came the sound of metal striking stone. The hunters had entered the ruins. He forced himself to keep going, though his legs burned and his chest ached from carrying the cubs. Every sound echoed to the hollow halls, every footstep bouncing like a drumbeat. He knew they were tracking him, and soon they would close the gap. At last, he stumbled into a larger chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, cracked and broken, letting beams of moonlight fall across the floor. In the center stood a great stone platform, covered in symbols that glowed brighter as he approached. The cubs wriggled from his arms and leapt onto the platform. Their small claws tapped against the stone, and suddenly the entire room came alive with light. Walls shifted, carvings flared, and ancient machinery groaned awake. Ryland stared in shock, his breath caught in his throat. The cubs were unlocking something buried for ages. But the heavy footsteps were growing louder. The hunters were in the halls, their voices echoing, their weapons ready. Ryland raised his rifle, sweat dripping down his forehead. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and cornered, but he stood firm in front of the cubs. If this ruin meant something to them, then it meant something to him, and he would defend it. The chamber shook as ancient lights blazed across the walls. Strange symbols flared like fire, and the air buzzed with energy that made Ryland's skin prickle. The cubs stood on the platform, their tiny bodies glowing faintly in answer to the carvings. It was as if the ruin itself recognized them. But there was no time to wonder. The hunters had entered. Their heavy boots pounded through the halls, weapons clattering against stone. Harsh voices echoed closer and closer, filled with excitement and hunger. They had tracked the beast for days, maybe weeks, and now they were about to take what remained of her bloodline. Ryland's grip on his rifle tightened. He took position between the cubs and the dark entrance to the chamber. His mind raced. He had cover, yes, but no backup. Ammunition was low. Every shot had to count. The first hunter appeared, tall, armored in jagged plates, and armed with a weapon that burned with violet light. It let out a roar and raised its gun. Ryland didn't hesitate. His rifle barked once, the shot cracking through the ruin. The hunter fell, armor sparking, crashing against a stone. But more followed. 3, 4, then 5, rushing into the chamber like a flood. Ryland fired again, moving sideways, ducking behind a broken pillar. Energy bolts tore through the air, searing walls and sending chunks of stone flying. The cubs cried out, their tiny claws scratching the platform as they huddled together. "Stay down," Ryland shouted, though he knew they couldn't understand his words. Still, something in his voice made them remain close, pressed against the glowing stone. He reloaded quickly, heart pounding. His soldier instinct screamed at him. Never get pinned down, always move. He rolled from cover and fired again, dropping another hunter with a precise shot to the throat. But their numbers pressed forward, forcing him back. The chamber groaned. The glowing carvings brightened as if feeding on the chaos. Ryland noticed cracks forming in the walls, stones shifting overhead. This place had been sleeping for ages, and now it was waking in anger. A deep rumble shook the floor. Dust rained down from above. Somewhere in the depths of the ruin, ancient mechanisms stirred. The cubs suddenly leapt from the platform and scurried toward a narrow passage, revealed by the shifting walls. Their small voices cried out to him as if urging him to follow. Ryland cursed under his breath. The hunters were between him and the passage. He had to cut through them. With a sharp breath, He sprang from cover, firing in controlled bursts. One hunter fell, then another, but their leader roared in fury, charging forward with a blade that glowed red. The strike came fast, slashing through the air. Ryland barely dodged, the blade slicing his shoulder armor, sending sparks flying. Pain seared his arm, but he drove forward, slamming the butt of his rifle into the hunter's face. The creature staggered. Ryland pulled the trigger. The blast threw it back into the wall, where it crumpled in a heap. The others hesitated for a heartbeat. That was all he needed. "Move," he growled, though he spoke only to himself. He dashed toward the cubs, grabbing them up as the ruins roared louder. Stones began to fall. Pillars cracked, and the chamber filled with dust. The hunters shouted, scrambling back, their confidence shaken. The ruin was collapsing around them. Ryland sprinted into the narrow passage. The cubs clutched tight against his chest. Behind him, the chamber gave way with a thunderous crash, sealing the hunters inside, or burying them alive. The hallway twisted and turned, lit by glowing lines that pulsed like veins of fire. The air grew colder, filled with a hum of machines older than human memory. Ryland ran without slowing, his boots slamming against a stone. The cubs clung to him, their tiny claws digging deep, but they did not cry. It was as if they understood the danger. The passage opened at last, spilling into another chamber, smaller but stranger. At its center stood a pedestal of dark stone, covered in symbols. The cubs squirmed, struggling to escape his hold. He set them down, and they ran straight to the pedestal. They pressed their small claws against it. Instantly, the entire room lit with blue fire. A star map unfolded in the air, massive and glowing, hanging like a web of light. Countless stars, systems, and pathways stretched across the space. Ryland gasped. He had seen maps before, but nothing like this. This was not just a chart. This was history. This was power. The cubs looked back at him, their eyes glowing brighter than ever. They chirped softly, as if asking him to see. But there was no time. The sound of rubble shifting echoed from the hall. The hunters were not dead. Some had survived the collapse, and they were coming. Ryland's hands shook. His instincts told him to run, to get out before he was trapped. But his heart knew what this was. The cubs had led him here for a reason. Whatever this map showed, it was important. Important enough to risk everything. He stepped closer, eyes fixed on the glowing stars. He saw lines connecting systems, worlds, colonies. And in the center, a symbol repeated, over and over, the mark of the beast. The cubs chirped again, louder now, their voices rising in unison. The map pulsed an answer, as if alive. Ryland realized with a chill that these cubs were more than children. They were keys to something the galaxy had long forgotten. The hunters roared in the distance, their boots striking closer. Ryland tore his eyes from the map and grabbed the cubs once more. He ran toward another tunnel, revealed by the light. Behind him, the star map shimmered, waiting. Ahead of him, the hunters closed in. The chase was far from over. The tunnel twisted downward, steep and uneven, carrying Ryland and the cubs deeper into the earth. His breath was ragged, his muscles screaming, but he did not stop. Behind him, the echoes of hunters grew louder, voices like snarling beasts, weapons clattering against stone. They were still alive, still chasing, and still hungry for blood. The cubs pressed close against his chest as he ran, their tiny hearts beating wildly. They didn't cry this time. They only stared at the glowing markings along the tunnel walls, their bright eyes reflecting the symbols as though they had always known them. The deeper Ryland went, the more alive the ruins felt. Faint blue light pulsed through cracks of stone, like veins running through a great body. The air thrummed with energy, old yet powerful, vibrating against his bones. It was not a ruin. It was something more, something waiting. At last, the tunnel widened into a vast chamber. Ryland stopped, his mouth dry. The space before him was larger than any hall he had ever seen. Towers of stone rose from the floor, each covered in glowing carvings. Rings of light floated in the air, turning slowly, casting shadows that danced across the walls. At the center of it all stood a colossal device, part altar, part machine, and entirely alien. The cubs wriggled free from his arms and ran forward. Ryland tried to call them back, but they ignored him. They scampered across the floor and leapt onto the base of the device. Their claws tapped against the glowing lines, and the chamber answered. The air exploded with light. Beams of blue and gold erupted from the walls, weaving together in the center. A holographic image flared into existence, so large it filled the chamber. Stars, thousands of them, connected by glowing paths. It was a star map, but not one Ryland had ever seen. The routes twisted into patterns that made no sense, yet felt purposeful, as if they had been designed by something far older than any known empire. Ryland's chest tightened. This was no random discovery. This was history, lost and buried. The cubs chirped, their voices soft but insistent. They pressed their claws against the glowing symbols, and the map shifted. Worlds zoomed closer, details filling the space. Planets circled suns, cities rose from the dust. Fleets of ships filled the void. Ryland gasped as he realized what he was seeing. Memories. The ruins were showing the rise of a civilization. The beast kind. He watched in silence as the vision unfolded. Massive creatures, like the mother he had seen die, walked across alien landscapes. Not just beasts, but rulers. They were intelligent, building cities of stone and metal, commanding fleets that stretched across the stars. They were a great empire once, feared and respected, their symbol carved on every world. The same mark he had seen glowing in the chamber before. But then the light shifted. The cities burned. Fleets shattered in fire. Worlds fell to ruin. He saw the empire collapse, torn apart by enemies he could not name. The proud beasts, once rulers, were hunted down, scattered, driven into hiding. The last images cut deep into his mind. The cubs' kind reduced to a handful of survivors, clutching their young, fleeing into wild forests. Hunted not for conquest, but for extinction. Ryland's stomach twisted. The mother had not just trusted him with her children. She had trusted him with the future of a dying people. The cubs looked up at him, their eyes glowing brighter now. They chirped again, louder this time, and the map shifted once more. A new image appeared, an unknown world, marked with the Empire's ancient symbol. The ruins highlighted it, pulsing with urgent light. Ryland's breath caught. It wasn't just history. It was a message, a destination. But before he could think, a sound cut through the vision. Boots, voices, growls. The hunters had arrived. Ryland spun, rifle raised, as shadows filled the tunnel behind him. Figures poured into the chamber, armored and armed, weapons glowing with deadly energy. Their leader stepped forward, a towering brute with jagged armor painted in scars. His helmet hissed as it retracted, revealing a twisted grin full of sharp teeth. He pointed at the cubs. His voice was guttural, but the meaning was clear. Take them. The hunters surged forward. Ryland opened fire. The first shot dropped the soldier instantly, the blast echoing through the chamber. He ducked behind a pillar, firing again, each round tearing through the dust and light. But there were too many. Energy bolts scorched the stone around him, burning deep holes into floor. The cubs shrieked, pressed against the base of the machine. The star map above flickered with their cries, pulsing brighter, feeding off their fear. Ryland gritted his teeth. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. He wasn't fighting for survival now. He was fighting for them. He rolled from cover, firing at two hunters rushing toward the cubs. One fell, the other staggered back with a scream, but more filled the chamber, circling, cutting off escape. The leader advanced, blade drawn, its red glow casting long shadows across the walls. His grin widened. "You cannot keep them human," he snarled in broken words. "They are trophies. Nothing more." Ryland's rage boiled. He stepped between the cubs and the hunter, rifle steady, eyes burning with defiance. "They're not trophies," he said, voice low and sharp. "They're the future." The hunter roared and charged. The chamber exploded with light. The cubs cried out together, their voices merging into one piercing sound. The machine beneath them flared to life, symbols glowing so bright they blinded everyone. The star map shifted, twisting, collapsing inward until a single beam of energy shot from the device. It struck the leader square in the chest, hurling him across the chamber like a rag doll. His armor cracked as he slammed into the wall, motionless. The other hunters staggered, their weapons faltering. Panic flickered in their eyes as the ruins themselves seemed to come alive. The floating rings above spun faster, filling the air with a low hum. The ground shook, cracks spreading across the stone floor. Ryland didn't waste a chance. He fired again and again, each shot striking true, each hunter falling under the combined fury of man and machine. The chamber trembled with every blast, dust raining from above, but he held his ground until the last hunter lay still. Silence. The cubs' glow dimmed, their small bodies slumping against the machine. They were exhausted, drained by whatever force they had unleashed. Ryland rushed forward, scooping them up, holding them tight. Their eyes fluttered, but they were alive. He looked around the chamber. The star map was fading, its light sinking back into the walls. The rings slowed, the hum softening into silence. But one thing remained, the glowing symbol of the beast's empire, etched deep into the pedestal. Ryland touched it. For a moment, he felt something stir inside him, like a whisper in his mind. Not words, but intent, a promise, a warning. The cubs were more than children. They were keys to something vast, something the galaxy had forgotten. And now, that secret rested in his hands. He looked toward the tunnel ahead, the only path left open. It led deeper still, into darkness. He adjusted his grip on the cubs, his jaw set. The hunters were dead, for now, but others would come. Word would spread. The death of the mother would not be the end. It would be the beginning. The tunnels narrowed as Ryland pressed forward, his boots crunching over loose stone. The cubs were heavy in his arms now, not because of their weight, but because of the meaning they carried. Every step, every breath, was a reminder of the promise he had made, to their mother, to himself, and perhaps now to something far greater than either. Behind him, silence filled the ruins. The hunters he had slain lay scattered in the chamber, their leader's broken body still smoldering against the wall. But silence did not mean safety. Silence meant waiting. Silence meant the storm was not over. The cubs whimpered, their small claws tugging at his jacket. They were exhausted, drained from the burst of power that had destroyed the hunters. Yet their glowing eyes still flickered with strange awareness, as if they understood more than he did. They were not ordinary children. They were heirs, keys, and living symbols of a forgotten empire. Ryland's jaw tightened. He had no map, no allies, and no plan beyond survival. But he had them, and for now that was enough. The tunnel curved downward again, opening into a new space. Ryland stepped cautiously into it, rifle raised. His breath caught. This chamber was different from the others. The walls here were covered in fresher carvings, less worn by time. The symbols glowed stronger, painting the room in soft blue light. In the center stood a massive stone figure, a statue carved with stunning precision. It was a likeness of the beast, the mother's kind. Its head was raised proudly, horns arcing high, wings folded across its back. Its eyes, carved from crystal, glowed faintly with life. At its feet lay smaller figures, cubs crouching close, their heads lifted toward the guardian above. The cubs in Ryland's arms stirred, making soft sounds as if greeting an old friend. The statue pulsed an answer, faint light running to the carvings like veins awakening after centuries. Ryland felt a chill. This was no mere monument. It was a memorial, a promise carved in stone. The message was clear. Protect the young and the legacy will endure. He set the cubs down carefully. They padded forward, touching the base of the statue with tiny claws. The chamber brightened instantly. Lines of light raced up the walls, weaving into patterns that told stories in silent language. Ryland stepped closer, watching as the images unfolded. He saw great fleets again, stretching across the stars. He saw empires rising, alliances forged, wars fought. And always at the center of it, the beast's kind, proud and unbroken. But then came betrayal. Shadows fell across the images. Armies turned against them. Hunters rose, not as rivals, but as predators, driven by greed and fear. Ryland saw them wielding the same weapons he had faced, the same hunger in their eyes. His stomach twisted. These hunters were not acting alone. They were part of something larger, something organized. This was not just sport. This was extermination. The cubs cried out suddenly, their voices high and frightened. The chamber shuddered as a sound echoed through the tunnels. Not stone breaking, not machines stirring. Voices. Ryland spun, rifle ready. They were back. From the shadows of the tunnel he had left behind, new hunters emerged. Larger, heavier armored, weapons glowing brighter than before. These were not the scattered raiders he had fought. These were reinforcements, soldiers prepared for war. At their head walked a figure taller than the rest. His armor was polished black, lined with crimson scars. His face was hidden behind a mask shaped like a skull. In his hands, he carried a massive weapon that hummed with energy. He stepped forward, his voice booming through the chamber. You cannot run forever. Human, those young belong to us. Ryland stood his ground, rifle steady, though his heart pounded. They belong to no one, he shot back. Least of all to you. The leader tilted his head, amused. You think you matter in this, little man? You are a soldier without an army, a guardian without a people. Lay them down, and I will make your death swift. The cubs whimpered, pressing against the statue. The crystal eyes glowed brighter in answer, as if sensing their fear. The ground trembled beneath Ryland's boots. He clenched his teeth. He had faced death before. He had seen hopeless battles and impossible odds. But never had the stakes been this high. Never had he felt so certain that surrender was not an option. Come take them, he said. The hunters roared and charged. Ryland fired, his shots sharp and precise. The first hunter fell, armor sparking, but the others pressed forward. Energy blasts seared the air around him, slamming into the statue, cracking stone. Dust rained down as the ancient guardian shook under the assault. The cubs cried louder. The statue's eyes flared, beams of light bursting from them, striking the nearest hunters and throwing them back. The chamber filled with thunder as the ruin itself joined the fight. Ryland moved quickly, rolling to cover, firing with deadly focus. His training took over. Breathe, aim, squeeze, move. Every shot counted. Every step was survival. Yet still they came, wave after wave, driven by greed and hate. The leader advanced slowly, his massive weapon carving holes through stone. Ryland dove as a blast tore past him, scorching the floor where he had stood. The heat burned his skin even through his armor. He gritted his teeth and rose, returning fire, but the leader's armor shrugged off the blows. This was no ordinary foe. This was a warlord. The statue shuddered again, its crystal eyes blazing brighter. With a deafening crack, the stone split down its center, and from within, something stirred. Ryland's breath caught as massive wings unfolded, wings of light, not flesh. The guardian was not just a statue. It was a construct, a machine, a protector built by the ancients. The hunters froze as the stone beast came alive, towering above them, its eyes burning with blue fire. It let out a roar that shook the chamber, shaking dust from the ceiling. Ryland grabbed the cubs, holding them close. Stay with me, he whispered. The guardian moved, striking with wings of stone and light. Hunters were crushed beneath its weight, their weapons useless against the force of history itself. The chamber became a battlefield, chaos filling every corner. The leader roared in defiance, his massive weapon firing beam after beam into the guardian's chest. Stone cracked, light flickered, but the beast did not fall. It fought with the fury of ages, defending the cubs as it had been built to do. Ryland fought at its side, covering the gaps, cutting down hunters who slipped past. Sweat drenched him, pain burned through his shoulder, but he held the line. The battle raged until only the leader remained. His armor burned, his weapon cracked, but his rage still burned. He raised his blade, roaring as he charged. The guardian met him with one final strike. Its claws of light pierced his chest, lifting him from the ground. His scream echoed through the chamber as his body crumbled in sparks and ash. Silence fell. The guardian stood still, its chest cracked, its light flickering weakly. Slowly, it lowered its head toward Rylan, the cubs, and the statue it had once been. It gave a final, low rumble, a sound of farewell, of duty fulfilled. Then the light faded and the stone crumbled, falling into stillness once more. Rylan sank to his knees, the cubs in his arms. His body ached, his lungs burned, but his spirit blazed. He had survived. More importantly, they had survived. The dust of battle still hung in the chamber, floating like ash after a great fire. Rylan stood in silence, the cubs pressed against his chest, his body trembling with exhaustion. The guardian had crumbled to stone, its light gone, but its final roar still echoed in his mind. He had survived. They had survived. But survival was not victory. Not yet. The chamber's glow shifted. The cracks in the walls pulsed faintly, as though the ruins themselves were breathing. The cubs wriggled free from his arms and padded back to the pedestal in the center. Their tiny claws touched the glowing symbols, and instantly the chamber came alive once more. Rylan staggered back, shielding his eyes as beams of light erupted from the walls. The ceiling trembled, dust cascading down. Then the air filled with stars again, a map larger than before, stretching from wall to wall, brighter than any he had seen. He caught his breath. It was a galaxy. Every world, every system, every shining point of light hovered around him, connected by endless paths. And at the heart of it all pulsed a single mark, the beast symbol, glowing brighter than the suns around it. Rylan stared, his heart pounding. This was no simple record. This was a claim, a declaration, a reminder that once, long ago, the cubs' kind had ruled not just one world, but thousands. Their empire had stretched across the galaxy itself. The cubs chirped, their voices small but steady. The map shifted in answer, zooming toward a cluster of stars. Rylan saw worlds covered in cities, fleets launching from great spaceports, armies moving like rivers of fire. The images were sharp, alive, as if pulled from memory. Then came the fall again. He saw the betrayal, the hunters, the destruction. But this time he saw more. He saw the hand behind it all. Not a beast, not a hunter, a council, figures cloaked in shadows, representing races from across the stars. They had not feared the beasts for their strength, but for their future. They had feared what the cubs would become, what their empire would mean. And so they had ordered the extinction. Rylan's chest tightened. This was not random cruelty. This was not simple sport. It was a conspiracy that had lasted generations. The cubs were never meant to survive. The map shifted again, showing one last image. A planet glowing with light, marked with the beast symbol. Rylan leaned closer. It was the same world the ruins had shown him before, the hidden refuge of the Empire, the place where their legacy still lived. The cubs turned to him, their glowing eyes filled with something he could not name. Hope, trust, duty. They chirped once more, and the symbol pulsed brighter. Rylan swallowed hard. He understood. They wanted him to take them there. The ruins rumbled as the map began to fade, the light sinking back into the stone. The cubs scurried into his arms again, curling close, their small bodies trembling. Rylan held them tight, staring into the fading glow. He whispered, "I'll get you there. I swear it." But even as he spoke, he knew the task ahead would be harder than anything he had faced. The hunters were only the beginning. The council itself, the shadowy powers that had ordered the extinction, would not allow the cubs to rise again. And now, he, a single human, stood in their way. He adjusted his grip on the rifle and looked toward the dark tunnel leading out. His mind sharpened with a soldier's clarity. He would need allies. He would need ships, supplies, and strength. But above all, he would need resolve. For in carrying these cubs, he was carrying war. The ascent, the path upward was long and cruel. The ruins groaned as if resisting his steps, as if testing him one last time. The cubs clung to him, silent now, their glow faint but steady. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time lost meaning in the endless stone halls. At last, faint light appeared ahead. Rylan pushed forward, lungs burning, until he stumbled out into the jungle once more. The night sky spread above him, full of stars. His ship waited miles away, hidden among the trees. But between him and safety stretched a wilderness alive with danger. He did not hesitate. He began the march. Every sound in the forest was sharper now. Every rustle, every cry of unseen creatures carried new weight. Somewhere out there, other hunters still moved. He could feel it in his bones. But he also felt something else. Strength, not his own, but shared. The cubs, small as they were, carried with them the spirit of their people. And now, that spirit was his to guard. The message, it took hours to reach his ship. By the time he arrived, the cubs were asleep in his arms, their breathing soft, their glow dimmed. Ryland laid them gently in the cabin, covering them with a survival blanket. For the first time since the encounter, they looked truly at peace. He powered up the systems, the hum of engines filling the night. As the ship rose above the jungle, he looked down at the ruins one last time. Their glow had faded, but he knew they were not dead. They had passed their message. The rest was up to him. He plotted a course toward the nearest human outpost, but his mind raced with doubts. Who could he trust? If the Council's reach was as vast as the ruins had shown, then enemies could be everywhere. Still, he knew one truth. Humans had always been underestimated. In a galaxy of giants, humanity was small, fragile, often ignored. But humans had a way of surviving, of adapting, of winning impossible wars. Perhaps that was why the mother beast had chosen him. The revelation. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, the cubs stirred, opening their glowing eyes. They looked at him, and for a moment, Ryland felt away their gaze. Not as children, not even as heirs, but as something greater. In their eyes, he saw the galaxy itself, its wars, its scars, its betrayals, and its future. And then he realized the truth. It wasn't only the cubs who were chosen. It was him. The ruins had tested him. The Guardian had fought beside him, and the map had revealed itself through his presence. The cubs had trusted him because their kind had trusted humanity before. Perhaps long ago, humans had played a role in their empire. Perhaps that role was not finished. He whispered to the cubs, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. We'll show them, all of them, that humanity is not weak, that you are not forgotten, and that together, he paused, looking out at the stars, we will shake the galaxy. The cubs chirped softly, as if in agreement. Epilogue, a new dawn. The ship vanished into the void, carrying one man and two cubs across the stars. Behind them lay the body of a mother, the ruins of forgotten empire, and the ashes of hunters who had underestimated a human's resolve. Ahead lay war, but also ahead lay destiny. For the galaxy did not yet know that the last of the beasts had been saved. It did not know that their cubs still lived, chosen and protected by a human. And when the truth came out, when the Council realized their failure, when empires saw the return of the Mark, shock would ripple through every world, every fleet, every throne. Because the galaxy had long believed that humans were fragile, short-lived, unremarkable. But now it would learn the truth. Humans were dangerous not because of power or weapons, but because of something far stronger. They could be trusted. They could protect. And when they made a promise, they kept it, even against the galaxy itself. Ryland adjusted the controls, his eyes locked on the stars.